Okay, it's entirely possible that the animals join us here for this, but now, okay, we are live. We are recording. We are live for Laying It Down with Big D. I'm joined by a very special guest here, DarfMike. How are we doing today?
Doing all right. Do I need to be laying down for this?
If you want,
I don't. I don't know if I can do that in my setup.
y-
Let's see.
yeah, I mean, get as comfortable as possible. That's really the whole idea here. Is we're just gonna rap a little bit about Counter Strike. I'm gonna try to turn you down on my iPad so we don't get a double feed on the microphone pickup here, because we're recording on my computer. We're recording in the bedroom as well. But really, yeah, we're just vibing out here, laying it down.
Sounds good. All right. I'm not actually gonna lay it down. I somehow messed up my chair, but I don't remember. Oh, there we go. I'm down
Okay, he's
and
going
back
down.
up. I don't. I don't remember how this chair works. I got it set up once, and now I'm not messing with it. So I'll stick. I'll stick like this. I'll stay standing up or
Hey,
sitting up
it
rather.
works as long as you're comfortable. That's all that matters, and the people
I'm
back home
comfy.
know we're vibing. Well, let's jump right into this bad boy here, Mike. I want to ask you, what's your earliest memory of Counter Strike?
What's my earliest memory of Counter Strike? I'm not a super early adopter. I only really started playing CS in like probably 2013. Um, maybe maybe earlier than that. I'm not actually sure when I started playing. But I started getting into the esports side of things in like 2012, 2013. Just watching games, checking things out. Um, I was in college at the time, not doing so hot with it, and I discovered the esports side of things and sort of fell in love with it and had that thought of like maybe this is something I'd like to do somewhere down the line. But yeah, that's when I really started to get into CS.
Did you immediately like start getting into like casting, or what was the first thing that like drew you into esports production?
No, I mean, so I had this idea, sort of this vague idea that casting and production or broadcasting in general might be something that I enjoy, but like, how do you get into it? I had no clue. I had no information. I knew literally nobody. I didn't play CS at anything approaching a competitive level, so I knew no one in that side of the world. What happened for me is that in 2017, right at the beginning of 2017, I was between two jobs. I had a job starting, but it wasn't starting for like I think like 3 weeks or something. So I was just kind of chilling, and I saw a Reddit post about Fragadelphia 10. That was just it was just a general Reddit post that Rob, the producer, had put out saying, hey, we're having this event in Philadelphia. If you're in the area, come out. We have this number of teams. Like, here's how you'd sign up for be a team, so on and so forth. And there was one line in there that was also we'll have open caster tryouts. And that was like one sentence in like a 5 paragraph post. And I responded with, what do you mean by open caster tryouts? Could I find out a little bit more about that? And he said, I think the to paraphrase it, it was, if you come on out, we'll put you on a mic on the B stream, and if you suck, we'll take you off the mic, and if you don't suck, you can stay on. So it was like, fuck it, let's go try this. I went up to Philly. I had been in school in Philly, so I knew a lot of people there, so I had places to stay. And I didn't have anything going on, so I went up to Philly for the weekend. I went out to that the time they were in a space up in Northern Liberties. That was the Freezadelphia. So we were in a warehouse that had no heating, as it turned out, in December, and snow was on the ground, or January and snow was on the ground. So that was a fun one. People were playing in like winter coats and stuffing hand warmers in their headphones to stay warm. Um, and I walked into that one, and I bought a spectator pass, and I sat down and watched a little bit, and then I walked up to somebody and said, "Hey, I'm here to do the caster tryouts. Where would I go for that?" And they sent me to the second location, which was much warmer and more comfortable, which was the old local host for anyone who's an old Philadelphia or Nerd Street head. Um, and I sat down. They put me on a microphone. I sat down. I did half a map with Mr. Mark Bach Wilson. Hello to the dog. I did a map with MCE, and I did a map with a guy named Holden, who's not around anymore. Nedlaw was his tag. For anyone who remembers him, he got out of esports, and I suspect is very happy with that decision. But they were the first ones I cast with. I did a few games there. It went pretty well considering how little I knew. got some advice from those people, and they told me, when you're done here, go talk to our producer Rob, who was the guy who'd made the Reddit post. So I went and talked to Rob. He was producing the A stream over in the freezing building. And he said, well, if they're telling you to talk to me, you must have done pretty well. So got my contact information. I started coming back for what they called the 0.5s, which were small, like 4, 5, 6 team lands they did in Philly every once in a while. And then came back for Frag 11 and kept going and went from there.
That's incredible. I mean, I got to tell you too, from my personal angle. By the way, we got the dog here joining us.
What's the dog's name?
That's
Very important.
that's my French Shepherd Garçon.
Garçon? Oh, there you go. Oh, I see him. He knows his name.
Oh yeah, I
saw the ears perk up.
and he knows he's allowed to just walk all over me if I'm laying down in the bed too. So no, I mean that's really inspiring because I'm kind of on a similar journey of I just got to work at Frag 18 in Kansas City, and obviously I've been playing Counter-Strike for close to 10 years now, and or a little over 10 years, but it turns out just playing the game over and over and pugging for hours a day does not equate you becoming a professional at the game. So I've been trying to figure out how to give back in the space, and getting to volunteer with Frag and work with those guys has been really incredible. I was going to ask you how was the transition as well? Because now you're working with ESL and you're on the S tier circuit and you're on the big stage. How was the transition from working with like a grassroots land like Fragadelphia to going into something like of high professional caliber, or at least what we assume is high professional caliber from the outside, like ESL?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a process. It took me a long time, frankly. The reality of being in North America is just that there haven't been that many events, right? There aren't that many events in NA, so the logic of giving somebody relatively new to the space a chance, there's just not that many opportunities. So for a long time, I was working the land circuit in North America. I did all the Fragadelphias, that's volunteer. And then with Nerd Street, they had the NCS circuit for a year where we did a bunch of lands all around the country. That was awesome. I did the ESEA Next Big Caster Challenge, which was really where I got my break into getting paid a little bit more than nothing for my work, which was a competition that ESEA used to run back when ESEA was a thing. That bring back the green branding. It's okay. Some of us love it. We don't all make Bitcoin jokes. But I did that competition the first year, or the first time they did it. I actually didn't even get accepted. I wasn't accepted past the first like juried portion, and that was a tough pill to swallow because the guy who was making the decisions was Bach, who I cast with. But he actually gave me really good advice off of that, of basically like, you're just not good enough yet, and like, here's things that you could work on. And after I was done being salty, it turned out to be very good advice. And then the second time around, I made it through that first round into the final 3, where it was a community vote as far as who wins it. And luckily for me, the guy with the biggest presence dropped out. So shout outs to Insomnia. He was good. He used to do the casting thing back in the day. Just withdrew himself from contention, so it wound up being me and Magic Helmet, Mitch, who wound up being my casting partner for a while. And we went out to Dallas to do the global challenge, and I wound up winning the vote for the next big caster, and we both got the opportunity to start working on ESEA games, start working on the main broadcast there. And that was where the start really happened in terms of getting more opportunities and just making some money off of it. I wound up going full time, quit my job and moved up to Philadelphia to go full time in 2019, June of 2019. And that first year was great. And then this little thing happened in 2020. You might have heard of it. Less great. Basically froze things up, canceled a bunch of opportunities that I was hoping to get that year, really shut things down for a while, where like people were still definitely working, but it got even more concentrated in Europe, I would say. And there were just not a lot going on for a while. And then in 2021, yeah, 2021, I had the chance to fill in for a couple days on one of the RMR Beyond the Summit broadcasts. which was a good one. Got me some recognition, got me some notice. And then I wound up getting invited to do some hosting for, they had these, it was the tail end of the DreamHack Opens. We were doing online DreamHack Opens. So I did a couple of those, and then I wound up getting an opportunity to go out to the studio in Katowice, Poland, and do another RMR event for ESL. That was, I think it was called, I'm trying to remember what it was called, ESL Fall or IEM Fall or something. It was basically just an online RMR qualifier because everything was online in those days. But I was in the studio in Kato, and that was my jump into actually doing in-person events around the world kind of thing. And from there, it just picked up. Did Kato, did the real Kato, IEM Kato, did start to get some opportunities with Blast as well, and yeah, so it as far as what the transition was like, there was definitely a shit ton to learn, especially because I was basically transitioning roles. I had worked as a caster, up until that point, basically, because again, at smaller tier lanes, you don't necessarily have a host per se, in that you don't have an analyst desk. So you're doing things on camera, you're interviewing people, you're doing all the different parts of a broadcast, but there's not going to be as defined of roles at like a Fragadelphia or one of those old Nerd Street lands where it's more just like everybody does things. And yeah, you might do more of one thing if you're better at it, but we're all just making the show go. So learning that role in a more formal manner was definitely an adjustment. But I think it's something that I really love and that lends itself to my natural talents. I had gotten one opportunity to host where there was a global challenge. It was the last global challenge ever, right before the pandemic, December of 2019, where Davey was supposed to be coming over to host, but he got sick and couldn't come. And so I swapped into the host role last minute, and our observer swapped into being a caster last minute. Shout out to Bugs. And that happened. But yeah, so I'd gotten the chance to host, and then the pandemic happened, and I didn't get to host for like a year and a half. Never got a chance to sort of flex that. But into 2021, I really got a chance to learn that role. And as far as like the professionalism, I guess it's still it's a similar vibe at a very different scale, right? Where fundamentally it is still a bunch of people coming together to make the show work, and put on the best show that you can. And in that sense, there is a similar level of like camaraderie, and most people are very happy to be there and love their job and that kind of thing. But there's definitely a shift in terms of needing to hit your beats, being careful about language, image, presenting things in the right way, doing more work ahead of time to prep, because when you're doing a Fragadelphia, like you don't these teams might not exist outside of that Fragadelphia
Right. There's
weekend,
not much
right?
history to go back on.
I mean, you know the history of individual players, you tell their stories, you tell what they've done before, but it's not like you're, presenting a bunch of graphics with detailed stat breakdowns of everything, right? So that was definitely a learning experience about how to put together a broadcast, how to frame things. And fortunately, in that first production that I did, I had a couple of very good producers, Tom Eric and Guy Bartosz, or Pogo, depending on what you want to call him, who just helped teach me a lot, showed me the ropes. And then those first few broadcasts, I really was just constantly picking the brains of the people who were working with me on the desk, of other hosts who were working at those events. I still do this, of the producer, because one of the things that you get in broadcast is that sometimes it is hard to get feedback, and sometimes so you have to seek it out, and show that, because like we're all freelancers, so you're in this weird world where you're not guaranteed to get the next one, and you're also like not you don't want to offend any of your coworkers or that kind of thing. And also there's this weird thing where you might kind of be in competition with some of them. That's not really as much of a thing in Counter-Strike, because I think people are pretty comfortable in their positions, so they're more willing to um lend a hand, or maybe we're just lucky with a lot of really good people. But I have heard that, especially in other esports as well, that there can be a reticence to help anybody else, someone else improve, kind of thing. But for me, I had a lot of very, very talented, smart, capable people who gave me advice, and showed me how to do things and talked me through how to do things and how to work with a run of show and this kind of stuff. And so it was challenging, but I think the people that I worked with and the opportunities that I had helped make that transition smooth.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's something that I think about a lot. Like you know, the whole talent industry. It's a gig economy, right? Like you want to help each other out. Everybody becomes friends. You all build this strong bond when putting on a production. But like at the end of the day, you still gotta watch out for yourself and stuff like that. So it's not surprising, but it's nice to hear that at least in Counter Strike, like the people that have been building this up over the decades, like they're so comfortable with the. It feels like the people in Counter Strike understand Counter Strike's not going anywhere. It's not some
Yeah.
flash in the pan game that's the moment of the year or whatever, right?
Yeah, we have a luxury of history that is super rare in esports. Like you have it in StarCraft and MOBAs and like Quake, I guess, but then StarCraft and Quake have just tapered away because there's not the same attention, there's not the same audience there, so those opportunities are limited. But in Counter Strike, we have a luxury. We have the best spectator esport in the world, as far as I'm concerned. And so yeah, it's been 2001. I think esports productions in some extent started to exist, and you've got 20 plus years of history of this thing developing and professionalizing, so you have a lot of people who have a lot of experience in a way that is a luxury that you just don't necessarily have in other games.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna ask you something here as well about stage hosting. This is a moment from Dallas 2023 when you were the
Okay.
stage host, and
I was the arena host at that one
the arena
specifically, if it's
host.
Dallas 23. Yeah, so James was stage hosting. The delineation between those is basically on broadcast versus just in arena. So for 23, for 24, I did the stage hosting and the arena hosting. For 23, I was specifically almost always only going out in the arena, which is a little bit of a different beast. But yes,
Well, my
23,
question
Dallas
is
23.
is I have so much admiration and respect for you. That was my first spectator event as a Counter
Oh hell
Strike
yeah.
fan. And if you remember day one, that T-shirt cannon did not work for you. And I felt so bad for you that every time you came out the rest of the weekend, everyone just booed you because of the T-shirt cannon. How do you deal with something like that? And like, does that get under your skin at all?
No, I thought that was awesome. That was great because it wasn't hostile booing, if that makes sense. It was we were all doing we had all engaged in a collective bit, and you could feel that in it, right? Where like what happened with the t-shirt gun is basically the way those work is that you have a pressure valve that leaks a certain amount of the compressed air into a valve, and then you fire it, and that shoots the gun out, right? And so we had on the first go, we had set it all up, we had prepped, and we'd left the valve just a little too loose, so it continued to leak. So by the time we got out there, I got one limp dick shot, and then nothing else. And it was empty, and we just had to throw some t-shirts and bail. And so that's what started the booze. But it was hilarious because then afterwards, it almost always worked. But whoever didn't get the t-shirt would boo me for not hitting them. And so it wound up being a collective bit where that role in particular, the in-arena hosting, is something I've gotten a chance to do a few times over these last couple years, and I really love it. It's um like part rodeo clown, part mascot type of vibe. The idea is you're wanting to keep everyone engaged and entertained while they're in the arena in between the games, right? So that makes the in-person experience special. It gives them something else. It also is the role that winds up doing a lot of the in-person sponsor obligations in terms of like Intel giveaways, monster stuff, like all those different brands, right? That have their things, that want their things. You want to make them happy. They're the ones who keep the lights on. Super grateful for everyone who sponsors and partners with esports events. But you wind up in this like in that moment, it was like we all engaged in a collective bit. And so I was never upset about the booze. I was egging them on. We were, bantering with different members. Like that was fun for me. That was the sort of organic moment with the crowd. That's really cool because obviously that wasn't the plan. It's the thing didn't go to plan, and we made it entertaining despite that fact. And so for me, like those boos were just they made me feel powerful. When I was in college, I was the mascot for a couple of years, and this is Well, that mascot mostly got either horrified looks or applause. It was sort of the in between. It was kind of a terrifying suit. But it's the in arena role where you're just working with the crowd and you're building a relationship with the crowd and you're making sure everyone's having a good time. It's the closest thing to mascotting I've experienced since mascotting.
That's really cool. Well, and yeah, I agree. I remember being there, and it was all a fun vibe. Nobody that was in the audience was ever like upset. It never felt hostile, like you said. And the fact that you're able to just lean into that part of the bit and commit to it as well, I think makes it so great. That does make me wonder, though. Have you ever have you ever experienced actual hostility from fans at an event?
I've experienced weird moments. The reality is just that, like, I want to preface this by saying 99% of fan interactions are absolutely lovely, and 99% of Counter Strike fans are absolutely lovely. The vast, vast, vast majority of people are, yeah, especially in person. The vast majority of people are absolutely lovely, right? But the thing is, just as you get a bigger bullhorn, as your voice, your reach, your audience, whatever, the in-person audience becomes bigger, you're going to have more people. And then statistically, you're going to reach a lot of people who like you, and you're going to reach some people who don't like you. And that's just the reality of building a bigger profile, right? Is like I don't think I've ever dealt with, like, I didn't really deal with a lot of hate or negative comments coming up. Like, you'd get the occasional thing. It just happens in Twitch chat. Someone's lost their bet and they've decided to try and ruin your day as a result of it. That happens all the time. But you do very occasionally get what I would say is a weird interaction. I've had a couple things where somebody took a bit too far, or had a guy reach out and like try and get me on like just weird things where it's like the line between, you know you're a fan of my work, we're a fan of Counter-Strike together, like we're collectively sharing that excitement, we're sharing our excitement in an event, because I very much like, I like being one of the crowd when I'm doing the crowd work. Like, I don't view it as that big of a divide between what I'm doing and what they're doing, right? My idea is that we are all collectively excited and enthusiastic about this thing, and we're sharing and building that, and my job is to sort of be a channel for the audience to share and build on that excitement. So I love those interactions. Every once in a while you get somebody who just doesn't quite get the social boundaries of where that's acceptable to go versus where's maybe like a little bit too much kind of thing. I had one guy this last Cologne who all weekend was begging me to do one of the competitions, one of the challenges. We do like bottle flips for one giveaway and like quizzes for another giveaway or whatever. And I finally I got one for him, right? I got one for him. He was this huge dude. So what I did is I had him in a competition with the smallest girl I could find in the audience, so that it just created a hilarious size difference. And they were doing like a bottle flip competition, right? And they were both terrible at it. They were both awful. It took them so many tries, but eventually she landed it. She got whatever the giveaway was. Is like a fridge of drinks or something. I don't remember what the actual giveaway was. And he got like a compensation token that he was supposed to take out somewhere. And apparently he then came back later and was like trying to waylay me and being like, I didn't get what I was supposed to get, blah 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 blah, like the booth didn't, yada yada yada. And it's like, man, I can't, that's not my department. Like, I'm not, I'm facilitating this, but I'm not actually giving you the thing. Like, I'm sorry. If you can give me more details, maybe I can try and make it right. But then he was like, I didn't want to do that competition. Like, can you give me another one? And this kind of, and just like kind of being a little too like stalling me out thing. And that's where it's like, okay, bud, I gave you a competition. You begged for it all weekend. You didn't win. Like, you let it go. Let it go. It's okay. You get them on the next one. Like, move on. But I would say that being said, like, those happen. 99.9% of interactions are lovely. If anyone wants to say hi and they're at an event that I'm at, please do. If you want a picture, please go for it. If you want something signed, absolutely. Never turn that down. extremely happy to have interactions with everybody because it is just wild to me whenever something like that happens that someone wants that, that I'm at a point where someone wants to have that interaction with me is very lovely.
I think it's so cool because I like. Yeah. Does it ever blow you away? The thing that has blown me away a few times, and this might not launch into a story necessarily, but the thing that has blown me away after going to IEM Dallas twice in the last 2 years and then being at Fragadelphia this time around is like, I don't know how much online Counter-Strike you've played, but things can get a little heated and a little nasty in those pugs sometimes, or even in an official or whatever. But like, then
Yeah.
you meet these people in person and they're all so nice. Why is that?
I think it's a lot of things. I mean, I think being online and anonymity allows people to get their demons out, their aggression, their nastiness about something else they might be feeling. I think that, the context of an online Counter-Strike game can also be immensely frustrating, as we all know. Any game where you're dependent on teammates or even yourself. Sometimes you're just frustrated because you're whiffing. Um, so there's that. And then I also just think that once you've put a face on somebody, once you've actually given somebody that person to connect to, you realize that whatever your disputes, your differences in one context might be, you're all here because you love one thing, and that's Counter-Strike. And so people then, instantly relate to each other. It gives people something to break the barrier of being strangers. So you have this connection. You have people like meeting online teammates they've never seen the face of before for the first time. And I'm speaking specifically about Fragadelphia as well here, where like there's just this real community feeling, where it becomes this meeting point and this celebration of a community that, you're right, is like 90% online all the time. Everyone's playing pugs and matches and whatever, and then you actually get together, and it's a little bit, in addition to being a competition, it's a celebration of sort of building those bonds. Um, as far as stories from that of like people meeting at LAN, that's the way I'm going to take it, because you're right. Like, people are mostly incredibly lovely in person. Um, there's also the like people meeting each other and forming lifelong friendships or relationships on LAN is really wholesome. Like, there's a couple who literally met at Fragadelphia and are now married. Um, and that's just so wholesome. Um, that like
Are you allowed to say who it
they've
is?
been. I think so. Yeah, I mean they're known. Tom and Thea, or Melissa is her actual name. She's one of those people who has a name and then made her tag another name, which is confusing, but it's okay. I didn't realize she had a different name for years. But no, they're two young kids. I guess they're not so young anymore because time keeps moving on. But when they were coming out to frags, they were like, like 17, 18 kind of thing, and they met each other, and they started a relationship and fell in love, and now they've got a life together, and a dog, and two dogs now, I think. uh yeah, and to me that's just it's kind of a beautiful thing, and it's an example of what happens. There's all sorts of versions of this, but it's people, meeting people they've spent hundreds, thousands of hours talking to, on Discord calls and Team Speaks and in games, and then actually seeing each other's faces for the first time is I think something that's really cool and special, especially about Fragadelphia and local lands.
That was one of the big feeling. I got to finally experience the post land depression, and part of it was we play this game online sitting in our house all the time, and then you go to LAN and you actually get to be around all those people, and you're like, oh wait, I have a ton of friends here. And
Yeah.
I felt like I seeded lifelong friendships there, but then you come back and you're back to your apartment playing Counter-Strike online by yourself, and you're like, well, when's the next one? That is a segue here. What do you think NA region needs? Obviously, Fragadelphia is kind of holding it together by toothpicks right now. Do you think that the VRS ranking system is going to invite more land? Like, and we obviously have Launder's land happening as well in January, so he's
Hmm.
starting something. But what do you think NA needs to like grow as a region and get back on the world stage as a like powerful force? Because there was a brief
I mean,
moment where we started to, but it quickly went away.
Well, the pandemic was really tough for North America. You had the loss of NA Pro League with the reformatting of Pro League. That was a huge blow. Then the pandemic happens, which shut down the local LAN circuit, which was actually kind of thriving in 2019, right? Like I talked about that year where we were just traveling around doing tons of LANs around the country. Like that was 2019. We had a LAN every month, if not two. Um, and so the pandemic hurt for that, and then you had this whole generation of players sort of shift over to Valorant because at the time it was the big shiny with all the opportunity. Um, and so those three blows really um, cut the middle and grassroots of NA down for a long time. Um, and I think that it's easy to point fingers at one of them. I think that it was the three at once that really killed us. In that, the death of NA Pro League meant that a lot of teams that were counting on the exposure in the event of Pro League now didn't have that, so they withdrew funding. So you lost a ton of funding from the pro circuit. Then you had the pandemic, which cut all the grassroots lands, cut all the locals, and that killed, the grassroots circuit. And then you had the move to Valorant, which took every generation of aspiring player who had been butting their heads against that pro ceiling for a while and not getting opportunities because the talent pipeline was very stagnant in North America. Teams weren't willing to take risks or move on. They were recycling the same talent for years and years and years. And so all those guys, guys like Zeppa, Crashies, Vanity, Curry, Asuna, like a lot of players um, moved over, and so you lost this generation, and you also lost a lot of the long-term knowledge keepers, guys like Josh RT, Shinobi, Ocean, who themselves probably weren't going to make a top-end pro roster, but did wonders in the community of teaching younger, talented players how to play the game right, and then they would develop on from there. You lost sort of three core aspects of what made NACS and made it, able to be successable. Now, that being said, I think we are in a better place than we have been since the pandemic, frankly. I think that NA is actually in comparatively a pretty good space. Could it be better? Absolutely. But if you look at salaried teams, we have more than we've had in years. We have, M80, Complexity, Liquid, Wildcard, NRG, Nouns. Um, then there's the ones that are maybe salaried, but a little less salaried, realistically. Your mites, your take flights.
Shout
No
out
clue
to
what those
Take
guys
Flight.
are making. Shout out. But it's like the fact that we have six. What is that? Depending on what you count Liquid as, 5 or 6, legitimate salaried rosters that are competing and growing and improving, and pushing each other for that spot of dominance. Um, I think that's pretty damn cool. That's pretty damn great, considering what has been recently, right? Um, so that's exciting. I think that building up the grassroots and having more lands in the circuit is huge. So I think Philadelphia and Launders Land, massive. We had the first Launders Land was last year, April, I want to say it was, and that was great. Sold out, massive event, got a lot of attention, lots of boots in the door. People were really excited to have it, and that's big for reviving Canada's land scene in particular. Toronto used to have a really thriving land scene. You used to have lands in Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver on a regular basis, and that's really been dead since the pandemic. A lot of the Canadian scene, especially like the French Canadian scene, they all went to Val. Um, or a large number of them did. You had this sort of shift. Um, so that's really cool to see, what Launders is doing up there. I think Philadelphia, the Kansas City event, having multiple sold out lands in Philly. Seems like every time they run one here on the East Coast, it sells out, which is sick. Starting to have those around the country again, as opposed to having one in Philly every once in a blue moon. As those get more opportunities, that's huge. I think that's massively important because I think that if you look at player development, right? If you just have the online circuits and you just have players growing up in the online environment, I think it builds into what you were talking about with, kindness in person versus online, toxicity versus in person online, is when you have these guys come through and just play like 8 seasons of league online or whatever, they don't get socialized If that makes sense. Like, literally, you're playing thousands of hours of pugs and matches and whatnot, and you're not actually seeing people. And, like, let's be real, a lot of the people who wind up in that situation do it because maybe they don't have the easiest time of things in school or that kind of environment of making friends and socializing. I'm not saying that's true for everybody, but it's definitely true in esports more so than in other competitive activities, right? That it can be the grind can be extremely isolating. And so having lands, having frequent lands where you meet up with your teammates, where you play together, that doesn't just help players develop in terms of how they're going to be in the server, but how they're going to be as teammates outside of the server as well, which is maybe just as important when you get to Pro CS of like, you know, being a good teammate, being a good human, knowing how to interact with people, knowing what's expected of you when you show up to a LAN, knowing how to prep, how to play on a stage in an environment where you're maybe not as comfortable as in your bedroom at home, right? Where you know you can't control every variable, you can't control every factor. It's going to be loud, it's going to be hot, it's going to be cold, it's going to be whatever. um, Getting that development is huge. So I mean, we've even seen it like in the last year. You know, M80 brought up Lake. Well, big part of their decision making was probably that he popped off at that Launders LAN, right? That he came out and he fragged on LAN, and he looked really damn good doing it in a tough environment, a non-perfect example or non-perfect situation. That tells you that somebody has a little bit more than just being an online frag star. And so seeing guys like Slump and Fruit Cup as well come out to LANs and compete on LAN, you know, where yeah, if you just do it online, maybe some people will cast aspersions on what you've done before, that kind of thing, and then you do it in person, you do it on LAN, you make it happen, and suddenly there's a little bit more weight behind the stats. There's a little bit more weight behind what you're doing. I think that's huge for development. I think that's huge for the new generation. For you know a lot of young talents that we have coming through. Europe's having their talent movement. We've got the Donks and the Monacies. It's time to find our own. Time to keep growing our own and moving them up the pipeline.
Looking at you, JBA. Is it JBA
There
or
you go.
JBA?
JBA,
That's
not
what
JBA.
that's what I thought.
It's weird that he did the capitalization. Everyone gives him shit for it because he does big J, big B, A, little a, which would make you think that it's JBA, but no, it is JBA. And when asked about the capitalization, I think his answer, as I recall, was, I don't know why I did that.
I've asked
So,
so many players about their names, and half of them will not even tell you how it's pronounced because they're like, however you want. I'm like, well, how do you say it? I don't know. All right, that's fine.
that's the correct way to do it. People type it out and they don't even think about how it should be said. It's like Flamesy went from Flamesy to Flames, or went from Flames to Flamesy to Flames, back to Flamesy. He's on Flamesy now. He's sticking with it. But, like, come on, bro. Make a decision.
Make a decision and stick with it. All right, well, Mike, I don't want to keep you for too long here. I don't want to make an excessive podcast hour. We're all gamers that probably aren't going to want to watch a full 2-hour podcast. But that being said, is there anything you want to say before we go? Any advice you can give to the young talent out there, or Counter-Strike, esports, or just life in general?
Anything I can give advice wise, I'll do a general one. I know I'm gonna speak of it from the talent perspective, but I think it applies to pretty much everything in life. And especially applies to people who are trying to make it out of the talent scene in the North American region. Sometimes things take longer than you think. Sometimes you know, you might think you're ready for something, but you might not have the opportunity to show that. And the thing that you can do best is to work and control what you can control and make yourself as good at whatever that thing is as you can with the resources that are available to you, so that when the opportunity comes, because the opportunity will come eventually, right? If you keep at it, if you have the chance to stick with it, if you have the discipline to stick with it, when that opportunity comes, if you're good enough, then people will know that you're good enough and you'll get more opportunities and you'll be able to stick around. So that applies definitely in the talent space. You know, it took me 4 years from when I started casting and 2 years from when I went full time to actually get what I would view as a tier 1 opportunity. And even that was, you know, studio tier 1. Um, but when I got there, because I'd been working, because I'd been doing all these lands, because I'd been at it for a while and had my opportunities to learn and grow in smaller environments and make my mistakes and make my fuck ups and big errors. When I got there, I was a whole lot better than I would have been if I got that event, you know, a year into casting or 2 years into casting, or whatever it is. And I think that applies to a lot of things in life where, obviously luck is a huge factor in life. Sometimes you need somebody to give you an opportunity. Sometimes you need something to break your way. But if when that break comes, when that opportunity comes, you're not ready to make the most of it, then you only have yourself to blame. And so, it's the expression of you make your own luck. I think that luck is still absolutely a thing, and there's been plenty of lucky moments and chances and opportunities that someone else has put me forward to that I'm immensely grateful for. But if I hadn't gotten myself to a point where, I was ready to do a good job of those, then I would have had those opportunities and I'd be out of it. So that's my advice. That's my advice. Control what you can control. Get good at what you can get good at. Work and hope that when those opportunities come around, you're ready to receive them.
Make yourself available to receive. I love that. All right, well, Mike, I thank you so much. I'm gonna say we've been laying it down with DarfMike here. That's the end of things.